Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another Wednesday Learn English live stream. If this is the first time you're watching, welcome. My name's Craig from Ingles, from mentioningles.com. Let's get it right,
You
Craig. Get
forgot
the
where
right
you're
name.
from, Craig.
No, I'm trying to
Wake up,
find
wake
the
up.
website. I'm trying to find the website. We're out of practice, Lynn.
We're a bit rusty.
From mentioningles.com, where you can learn English for free whenever you like, because it's a website with lots of material. We also have a podcast, and you can listen to that at inglespodcast.com every Sunday. Myself and my co-host make content for you so that you can improve your English. And with me today, I'm happy to introduce, if it's the first time watching, my good friend Lynn. Hi, Lynn.
Hello, Craig. How are you?
Very well,
Apart
thank
from
you.
being a little bit rusty.
A little bit rusty. My God, it's very rusty, but we're getting there. We're getting there. How are things? Are you okay?
I'm really happy because I've just had a nice week's holiday and I had a lovely relaxing time, and it's a bit tricky this week getting back into the swing of working again. But I'm sure by the next Facebook Live, I'll be,
Yeah, we'll go back
to normal.
We'll go back also. If you're watching the replay, thank you for spending time with us. We'll be going back to our regular time of 8 p.m. Central European summertime. So we're going to be at half an hour earlier in 2 weeks. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And you've got my banner up there. I'm from putitlikethis.com. I know that. Craig didn't know where he was from.
I didn't know
you
where
said
I was
I'm from Ingles.
Yeah. Well, I've got like 3 or 4 websites, so
That's
I'm confused.
You've got too many websites. I only have one. My website is putitlikethis.com. If you haven't been with us before, I'm an online English teacher and I specialize in tailor making courses for students. So I don't do standardized courses. I do tailor made courses. So if you have a specific goal in English, then you tell me about it and then I try to put together a course for you so that you can achieve whichever objective you have. You can find out more if you go to the website.
Yes, and I recommend you do that because Lynn will teach you very, very well a tailor-made specialized course. So if you're looking for a private teacher, then you will not do better than to go over to Lynn's website and get in touch. Let's say hello
to you, Craig. Thank you.
Let's say hello to people who are joining us live on Facebook and on YouTube today. Hi, Hema. Good to see you. Thanks for joining.
Hi.
Isma.
Hello, Isma. Chris. Vicente.
Vicente from Valencia. Good to see you here, Vicente. Yes.
Great. Hi.
My neighbor.
And Maria Dolores. Yeah, great. And she's been with us before too. So yeah, hi. Nice to see you all.
So what are we going to speak about today? Obviously, I spoke a bit last week about the death of the Queen of England. Obviously, unless you've been hiding under a rock and not watching any news or listening to any radio, then you must know that obviously the Queen passed away last week, which made us think of today's topic, which is, where were you when you heard about important people dying or passing away? And also like the first time you ever did something, which we'll come to a bit later. But let's start with the first one. Where were you, Lynn, when you heard about the Queen's death?
Well, actually, I do remember when we decided to do this, Craig and I thought, that often people have stories to tell, don't they? Because they say, "Oh, I remember when that happened."
When that happened.
And then it's sort of like a conversation starter, or it can be a conversation filler, or it can be a whole conversation. And so that was a bit of the rationale behind doing this, because it's something that we often can use when we want to speak and make a conversation. So, but we will talk a little bit later, because when we planned this, Craig and I thought, oh, that'll be easy. But then when we made a list of different occasions, we realize that some of them we can't remember anything.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about why in a moment. But the Queen's death, I do remember because it was very recent. So I do remember when I heard about it. And I was actually at this computer right here. And I was teaching and doing some office work, doing some admin on the computer. And I think I'd had a class previously as well. And strangely enough, I first heard a ding dong on my phone, like the little sound that you get, an alert. That's it. Thank you. I heard an alert, and it was from the BBC. And the Queen hadn't died. They were talking about speculating that the Queen was ill. And then I got up to go to the kitchen and I put on the television news. And there on the Spanish news, it was all over the Spanish news. And they were speculating that the Queen was about to die. And to be honest with you, Craig, I found that horrible. I was really shocked about that. And I thought, why are they speculating on television about the imminent death of somebody?
I have a theory.
Do you? They just wanted to get the figures up, or what?
Well, I never used to be a fan of conspiracy theories. I used to poo-poo conspiracy theories. I've put that in the chat. To poo-poo something means you don't like it, you don't agree with it, you don't believe it, you think it's rubbish. There's no conspiracy. But I've been listening to some podcasts that speak about conspiracy theories because they don't believe a lot of the things we hear in the media. So I've started questioning the media. And my conspiracy theory about the Queen's death is that she died before they told us.
Oh, no, I quite understand that.
And the photograph that we saw of her shaking hands with Liz Truss was photoshopped.
Oh, really? No, I don't believe that.
She doesn't look like somebody on her deathbed, and that was only a day or two before she passed away.
No, but she does, Craig, because I looked at that photograph, because it was shocking, because we had just seen her shaking hands with Liz Truss. But I did notice, I don't know if you noticed, but I noticed straight away because I have I have elderly people around me who have been ill. And I don't know if you noticed, but on that photograph, you can see that on one of her hands, her hand is all black and blue because she probably had
a drip
in her hand. That's what happens when you have intravenous things. So I'm not sure whether I agree with that, but I do. Coque agrees with you. I'm not sure, but I do suspect that she had died earlier, because there makes no sense that somebody releases to the press news that somebody is going to die.
And they were talking about her on the BBC as though she was already dead.
Of course. And that's what I found.
Programming had been completely changed.
Exactly.
They changed the programming.
Yeah. No. So I agree with you. Hema agrees with me. Well done, Hema.
We've got a split audience. We've got a split audience today.
I do agree with you that it was a little bit staged, and I did find it, regardless of when she died, because I mean, the thing is, she died, all right? But the thing that I really objected to all of this media sensation about, is she going to die? Are they going to make an announcement? Because I find that, I understand that I do understand that the sensationalism when there's an accident or there's a terrorist attack or something like that, that people come, but people rushing with the news that is speculative, that is also so negative and is also so personal. I mean, I didn't know the Queen personally, obviously, but I mean, she's somebody's mother, she's somebody's aunt, she's somebody's grandmother. And can you imagine how you must feel as a human being if you are close to her and you have that all over the media? And I find
although she was a
really,
public figure, so I could understand the interest.
But there are moments, I think, in a personal life that belongs personally to you.
Isma was sitting on the sofa watching the news, and suddenly she saw the breaking news that the Queen was in a critical state. She was dead by then. She was dead by then.
And I have to say, I didn't finish my story. It's because I'm going on, you see. But when I was sitting back at the computer, quite annoyed about all of this speculation, I turned off my alerts on the BBC because I thought this is stupid. And then suddenly my daughter, bless her, she ran into the room and she said, Mom,
the Queen's dead. The Queen's dead.
Take the headphones off. And I took the headphones off and I said, what's the matter? And she said, the Queen's about to die. And I actually took out all of my frustration with my daughter and I told my daughter off. Phrasal verb, to tell somebody off. When you tell somebody off, it means that you are quite critical with them. Yeah, I scolded my daughter and I said, look, don't get excited about bad news. It's not right to be excited about bad news.
It can wait.
And just wait. We can react when we have the bad news, but not before you have the bad news.
Interesting observation.
So my poor daughter, she got all of my frustration. So I do remember when the Queen died.
You won't forget that in a hurry.
I won't forget it.
And
nor
neither will
your
daughter.
No.
Interesting observation by Isma, who says the journalists were wearing black suits before they announced that she was dead.
Absolutely.
They knew, either they knew in advance or she had already passed away.
I think probably, Craig, you are right. I think there had probably been a huge agreement with the BBC and the palace about how to release the news. And that was probably one of the strategies to release the news. So I think possibly she had definitely died before she supposedly died. I'm not sure about the Liz Truss Photoshop. That smacks of conspiracy theory to me.
I don't know. But I think anything's possible. And maybe just meeting Boris Johnson and Liz Truss in the same couple of days just finished her off and she couldn't take any more.
Craig, that's a bad joke.
Whatever your politics may be. So speaking about people dying, now we did use the word to die recently, just now, but I think that's okay if you don't know somebody personally, but when you're talking about people who are close to you, or at the least people you don't know very well, it's more common to use the phrasal verb to pass away or to pass on. So sadly, my next door neighbor passed away yesterday, or my cousin has passed on. He's not with us anymore. If you use the expression that they're not with us, that means they're not with us in life anymore. So all of these expressions mean that the person is dead.
And then you've got to meet your maker. I suppose that's only for if you are a believing
religious.
If you're religious or you believe in God, to meet your maker. To be deceased.
Quite formal.
That's a descriptive, isn't it? Yeah, that's very formal, to be deceased. And I don't think we use it so often. Like, you don't say he was deceased, do you? Do we say she was deceased?
She was, no, it's very,
I don't think
strange.
We do use it. That sounds strange. I think more common is to use deceased as a noun, and you say the deceased person. So deceased is an adjective, which it goes before person, the deceased person. And sometimes we just take away the person and we call it the deceased. So we make a noun from the adjective deceased.
And it's very often used in formal situations, deceased.
Yeah, and often in police shows, isn't it? When they talk about the person who has died, the police or the authorities, they talk about the deceased. It's a very formal word. And then to not be with us anymore.
And to slip away.
And to slip away.
To slowly pass on, to slowly stop breathing and pass away.
Yeah, to slip away describes more the manner of your death, doesn't it? To slip away implies that you had a very peaceful death, that possibly you fell asleep and then you died. It's not a violent death at all.
Yeah, you can say that my grandmother slipped away peacefully in her sleep. For example.
Yeah.
Okay.
Carlos says, mucho inglés. Well, you've tuned into the right show, Carlos.
Yes. Yes,
This is a way of lot of English.
this is what you're here for. That is what we will give you. Mucho
That's
inglés.
right. This is good listening practice for you, Carlos, because you get to hear two native speakers talking to each other, which is a little bit different to when your teacher just talks to you on your own.
That's right. Active
Mhm.
listening today.
Mhm.
So let's look at some more vocabulary before we speak more specifically about major events or people passing away that you specifically remember. So, ways of talking about major events. Here we have some example vocabulary. To be assassinated. Now, what's the difference between to assassinate someone and to murder someone or to kill someone? To be
Oh, that's a
assassinated or
good
to be
question.
murdered?
Uh-huh. I think murder, to be murdered. Oh, what would you say? Maybe
I
assassinated is more, it's premeditated, isn't it? That
You
you've
can have
thought about it
premeditated murder.
before.
I don't think that's the
You can.
difference.
Or what's the difference then? Is it because somebody's very famous?
Yes,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
important. I think you can murder anybody. That's a more global, more common term. But you
Uh-huh.
tend to assassinate people of importance. So the president was assassinated.
Uh-huh.
You assassinate people who are in a high position, people of importance.
Uh-huh.
But the actual idea of killing someone or murdering them is the same. If you're assassinated, then you're killed. You're murdered, aren't you?
But it's not something to aspire to, is it? It's not something to be like, you and I would be murdered, wouldn't we? Because we're
Yeah,
not
we're not
famous enough.
important. Yeah. Well,
But I don't
we're on the
mind.
internet. We're on the internet. Craig and Lynne were cruelly assassinated during their terrible Wednesday live stream.
Yeah, that's right. We might be assassinated. You could make a good conspiracy theory about that.
Yeah, they were assassinated
Were they
months before.
assassinated or were they murdered? Or was this live stream recorded months ago?
It was a rerun. Yeah, it was a rerun.
No, but it can't be because we're talking about the death of the Queen. So we know
That's
it's
true.
recent.
I'll hold up a newspaper in a minute. To be killed, so to be assassinated generally talks about more important people. To be killed in an accident, that's one way you can die.
Yeah, and these are kind of like major events like you see in the news. Like, for example, Lady Diana was killed in an accident.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Obviously, in a terrorist attack, a terrorist can murder you
Mhm.
or plant a bomb and kill you that way. And famous people, sometimes in music, sometimes actresses, people in the public eye, we can
Mhm.
say, can die of an overdose that
Mhm.
involves drugs usually.
Mhm.
Or you can you overdose on alcohol? Yeah, you can have alcoholic poisoning, can't you? You can have
I
too much
think so.
alcohol.
And it can be, I mean, sometimes it's medication as well, isn't there? There was a lot of speculation with Michael Jackson whether they don't think he deliberately overdosed. I think they think it was just sort of a mistake with his medication. He took too much of his normal medication.
Yeah. Yeah.
That it
And
wasn't a
then
deliberate attempt.
that's right. And then if you kill yourself, that's when you commit suicide. Notice that collocation. You don't do suicide or make suicide. You
No.
commit suicide. And you also commit murder if you murder somebody else. So that's an interesting collocation with the verb to commit suicide. We have some more expressions that are more informal. Now be careful. Be careful where you use these because they can be insulting, especially if you don't have a very close relationship to the person you're speaking to who has unfortunately lost. Oh, that's another one, isn't it, Lynn? To lose someone.
To
You
lose
can
somebody
lose
it's a euphemism for to
euphemism.
die.
Yeah.
It's a euphemism for die. But these are also expressions which may mean to die, but they're not very sensitive, are they? They're a little insensitive.
Yes. And
Yeah.
they can be very offensive if you
Mhm.
use them in the wrong context. So be careful. To kick the bucket, that's probably got a very interesting
Origin.
etymological history. maybe where you hang yourself and you stand on a bucket
I think so.
and you kick the bucket
The
away
bucket away, and then you fall. It's not
and you
very
fall.
nice. Uh-huh.
No, it's not.
No.
To snuff it, because if you have a candle or a flame and you extinguish the flame, then you can
Or blow
snuff.
it out. When you
Yeah,
blow it out, that's to snuff it, isn't it?
to
Uh-huh.
snuff it. So if you snuff it or you know somebody who has snuffed it, that's a very, very informal slang colloquial expression for to pass away.
Mhm.
And to give up the ghost has probably got a very nice history as well, but I don't know what it is. If you
Mhm.
give up the ghost, then you pass away.
Mhm. Yeah, it's
So
tricky to know. I mean, they are very, very common expressions, but it's a little bit like the swear words, for example. You've got to be very careful using those, because if you don't have the right context and it's not the right situation, especially as a foreigner, you can offend people with those, because it has
yeah,
to be in the right environment, doesn't it? With the right people in the right context to use those expressions, I think,
I
because they're
agree.
very informal.
But I think it's good to know for your receptive language. So
Oh,
if you
yes,
hear
definitely.
somebody say, "Oh, my next door neighbor unfortunately kicked the bucket last week." He kicked the bucket. Is his foot okay? No, he's actually dead. So you
He's
need
there
to know these to
to
understand
understand
what's.
them. Absolutely.
But
Mm.
I think if you take away one thing from this live stream, it's to try to use the phrasal verb to pass away or
Mhm.
to pass on instead of to die, because it is
Yes,
a
they're
lot
they're more
nicer.
sensitive. They're more sensitive, aren't they? Mhm.
So where were you and what were you doing when? We've already spoken
Uh-huh.
about the Queen. We
But you
mentioned.
didn't tell me, what were you doing when you heard the Queen had died?
Do you know why I don't remember? Because I knew she was ill,
Mhm.
and I was kind of watching the news, and then my conspiracy theory thing started happening, and I thought, well, she's probably. I don't think. I thought I was surprised that she had lived so long, because
Mhm.
after the death of her husband, Prince Philip, I suspected that she would die within 6 months or 8 months, and she
Mhm.
actually lived longer. But when
Mhm.
she actually died, like the actual moment wasn't a shock to me, because I knew
Mhm.
she was very frail,
Mhm. Mhm. Oh.
Frail, very weak,
Mhm.
and I didn't expect her to live very long. But I don't actually remember hearing the news, because it was
Mhm.
something I expected.
Mhm. Okay, so let's pick another topic then, yeah?
Well, we've mentioned Lady Di.
Oh,
Um,
Caroline, sorry, Caroline. Well done, Caroline. Caroline's just reminding you when you heard about the Queen, Craig.
di Oh, did we? That's right, we did, didn't we, Caroline? Yes, of course. Yeah,
I'm glad,
somebody
Caroline.
in the
You
c
see, you're keeping him right. You see, he's
yeah,
he's having a mental lapse,
I'm having a senior moment. I'm
a
having a
senior
senior moment.
moment.
Yeah, but as I said, Caroline, I kind of thought she was probably dead before that, but,
Mm,
yeah, we that's right, we heard the news during the class. One of the students said, "Oh, the Queen's dead." I think it was Anna who said the Queen's
hmm.
dead, and
Oh,
then we
okay.
sort of carried on with the class. I did not let that distract me, my professionalism of teaching English, so I that's
You were
probably why I
still
don't
following
remember.
your lesson plan, weren't you?
I was following my lesson plan, yes.
Okay, so what can you remember when Lady Di
Yes, I
died?
can. Yes, I
Yeah, what were you
can.
doing?
It was 1997, and I
Mm,
was visiting my friends in London, just outside of London, and we were watching the television. I was sitting in their lounge on the floor,
mhm,
and the news came on the television, and we were shocked. And isn't
mhm,
it strange that I remember, and my memory is very, very bad. I have a terrible memory. I remember exactly who I was with, where I was, what I was doing, and the date. I know it was in August
mhm,
1997. Do you
mhm.
remember?
I do, because it was August the 30th, I think,
Or
or
31st?
31st. And I remember as well, I was in Germany and I have two friends. One of them has a birthday on the 31st and one of them has a birthday on the 1st of September. And we had arranged to meet for a brunch and to celebrate both birthdays. And we were celebrating the friend who had the birthday on the 1st of September a day early. And we were sitting in a cafe. And then my friend who had the birthday, she was American, she walked into the cafe and we were all sitting there and she said, "You'll never guess." That's a very common phrase to introduce that. You will never guess, you'll never guess Lady Di has died. And we said, "Oh, tell us another one." We didn't believe it. We thought it was crazy. We thought she was joking or playing some kind of prank or something. And she said, no, I'm serious. And it kind of spoiled the brunch, actually, because it was like you said, we were all shocked, but we were like,
Yeah.
what do you do when you find out such bad news? It kind of spoiled the brunch because we were all looking forward to having champagne and, celebrating the birthday.
Speaking of conspiracy theories, did you speculate to if it was actually an accident or if it was
Well, there's
caused
been
by
a lot of
somebody?
conspiracy theories, hasn't there? I think it was
Yeah.
pretty obvious that the paparazzi were involved, but
They
I
were
don't know
chasing the
whether
car.
the car was being chased, but whether I don't know. I poo-poo a lot of conspiracy theories, but there is an expression in English, where there's smoke, there's fire.
I'll
You
write it
heard
in the
that one as
chat.
well? Yeah, where
Yes.
there's smoke, there's fire. So who knows? Maybe there is some truth to it. I don't know. But I don't like speculating about things, It doesn't really interest me very much. So
Cocker remembers that day as well. Yeah.
what were you doing, Coque, then? Tell us. What were you doing?
What were you doing? Were you with your family, or how did you hear the news? Caroline recently heard the theory that the driver was drunk.
I think that was proven, though, wasn't it? That was proven that he had a high alcohol content.
Well, I won't say anything. We never know what happened and why, but maybe we will one day, because I think these things, if they are conspiracy theories and if the government or the royal family or the media were misleading us,
then maybe that will come out
eventually. I think it comes out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But in a similar way, I remember we mentioned Michael Jackson as well, and I remember exactly where I was when I heard the news about Michael Jackson. I was in
Where
London with friends. Actually, my friend Lewis from the Mansion Inglés, my business partner, and his wife, we were on holiday in London, and somebody walked towards me with a mobile phone and just looked up from this mobile phone and said, "Michael Jackson's just died. It's on Twitter." So of course we went on our mobile phones and we checked it, and he was right, this person, and I just remember that it was June the 25th, 2009.
2009.
Yeah. Do you remember?
I can't remember when Michael Jackson died, but it's funny. And now we come to what we were talking before we started the live stream, is that I liked Michael Jackson a lot. And so I remember, obviously I knew he died, and I can't remember what I was doing, though, when I heard the news that he was dead. And then I was thinking, well, why is it I can remember when the Queen died or when Lady Diana died, and why can I not remember what I was doing when Michael Jackson died? And my theory is that it depends if you were actually if you had somebody near to you at the time that you could share the shock with, because I think with Michael Jackson, I probably just saw it alone, or I read it on my phone alone. I don't know, were there phones in 2009? I can't remember.
Yeah, mobile
but
phones.
But I don't think I was actually doing something with people. Whereas with Lady Di, I was having a birthday brunch, and
you heard the news,
exactly,
so it became a topic of conversation.
And for example, I remember the Queen because I had an argument with my daughter. Poor thing, because I was saying, "Don't speculate." So,
I,
I think it's to do with that. That kind of fixes it in your head a little bit more, the memory. Do you think or not?
I think that can be true. I think that can be true, but not always. And the example I have is with Bob Marley, because I remember Bob Marley died. I've got the date here, May 11th, 1991. I was in the UK because it was before I came to live in Spain. And I can remember we had a radio on top of our fridge in the kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
and the news came on, and I was doing something in the kitchen, and my mum was there in the kitchen, and I remember hearing the news that Bob Marley had died, and I remember I started crying.
Really?
And I think that was the death that has most affected me. I still am a big Bob Marley fan of his
Wow.
music and
Uh-huh.
reggae. Now, I couldn't share that news with my mum because she didn't know who he
Uh-huh.
was. She didn't like his music. She liked Frank Sinatra and Shirley Bassey
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Barbara Streisand. It was a different
Uh-huh.
generation. So I was on my own with my sadness
Uh-huh.
because I really like Bob Marley. So, and
Oh,
I
isn't
can,
that
it's
interesting?
as though it happened yesterday. I can
Yeah.
remember it very, very clearly.
Wow.
So
But
I
you
think
had a
it,
big emotional reaction to it. So that's also
yeah,
something
and it
that
isn't,
sticks in your memory, doesn't it?
it's very
Mm-hmm.
strange. Yeah, it's very
Mm-hmm.
strange how it can affect you. Maybe I was sad about other things in my life, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what caused me to be emotional. It just
Mm-hmm.
added something more on top.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
it made me sad. Do you remember when
Oh,
Elvis Presley died?
no. I know he's dead, but I couldn't remember. But I think you looked up the date and he died in 1977. Now,
August the 16th,
yeah, I mean,
1977. Yeah.
why do you think I'm older than that, Craig?
Well, you were probably a little girl.
No,
Most of
I
the
was a
people
very little girl.
watching
They
were
would
probably not
definitely
born,
not know about
and
Elvis Presley.
they're thinking, Elvis who? Never heard of him. Who's Elvis
Exactly.
Presley?
Yeah.
But I was on holiday in the south of England, in Cornwall or Devon. I
Hmm.
think I was in Devon with my family, and I remember reading the headline. We were sitting on the beach, and my ex brother-in-law had a newspaper, and I remember reading the headline: Elvis
Hmm.
Presley has died, and obviously he was a big Elvis Presley fan,
Hmm.
and I just remember where I was when I heard or saw the news.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And how did he die?
I
I think he
think it
died
was
of
an
a
overdose
overdose,
as well.
wasn't it? That was the word
Drugs,
we had
yeah,
before. He
an
died of an overdose,
overdose.
I think. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And
Now you
Michael Jackson too. Yeah, Michael Jackson also died of an overdose, but they don't know whether it was deliberate or accidental, I
well,
think. Do they?
we were told
It's
that
another conspiracy theory.
no, I don't have another theory,
Uh-huh.
but we were told that he really basically said to his doctor what he wanted the doctor to give him. So
Ah, okay.
I
Uh-huh.
think he probably upped his prescription. If you
Mm-hmm.
up something, you increase it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think his doctor really gave him too many tranquilizers or whatever he was
Mm-hmm.
taking, too many drugs. But who knows? I mean, we
Yeah.
don't know what happened really.
No, 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 no.
You've mentioned Gorbachev. Why did you mention Gorbachev?
Well, I mentioned Gorbachev because he also died just a week before the Queen. And I was
Oh yeah,
actually, I was traveling back from New Zealand. I was on a plane somewhere, and in between places, I was getting alerts on my phone, and then I remember reading the news about Gorbachev. And I suppose because I used to live in Germany, Gorbachev was a very important historical figure, really, for Europe, because, of course, it was because of Gorbachev that the Iron Curtain fell, that the Berlin Wall came down,
Glasnost.
um, and Glasnost, and of course he was quite a pivotal figure in history, in our recent history, wasn't he? In our history.
Yeah.
Certainly for Europe, maybe not so much for South America, but in Europe, Gorbachev was a very important figure. But because I was traveling at the time when I got the news of his death, it kind of they didn't make a really big thing of Gorbachev's death. Maybe that's also because we're at the moment because of the war with Russia. Maybe they didn't, but I was surprised that they didn't publicize it more. Gorbachev was very well liked, I believe, in the west of Europe, but I believe in Russia he was quite a controversial figure,
Yeah.
from what I've heard, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure. Uh-huh.
No, that I agree. But I'm surprised they didn't publicize it more in Western
Mhm.
media, because obviously they want to annoy Putin as much as possible, and nothing
Mhm.
annoys Putin more than to remind him what Gorbachev did to the Soviet Union, which was basically
Yes.
break it up, and
Uh-huh.
now he's trying to bring it back together again. So
Uh-huh.
I'm surprised they
Yeah.
didn't make more of it. But yeah, it was
Yeah.
covered very well on most news channels,
Yeah.
Gorbachev's
Uh-huh.
death.
Mhm.
Hey, D, you said,
Heidi. Oh,
yeah.
you're 65, Heidi. Okay. And you remember when JFK died, really? Oh, wow. My mum was listening
Well,
to the radio and we felt sad. Of course, that's a very, very visual assassination, isn't it? I think,
yeah,
I mean, I would, no, I couldn't have been born when did JFK die? When was,
63, was it, Heidi? Let me Google it. But Heidi, do you have a
uh-huh,
conspiracy theory about his assassination?
JFK.
Now, he was
Caroline says
assassinated.
63. He was assassinated. So that was
63.
definitely before I was born. Definitely.
That was the
I-
year I was born in.
that was
So
the year
that
when I
was,
was born the
yeah,
year after.
I was still in hospital when that happened.
Uh-huh. So I can't remember it, but of course I have seen that footage of JFK over and over again. It was a very
Visual thing.
visual assassination, and that's also something that I also think, like we see that, but I think to myself, if you were a member of his family or his children, it must be so painful to
Mm.
actually see that footage over and over and over again. And I think also that it's a bit bad taste that we keep putting on that footage, personally.
Yeah,
I
I
don't think
agree, but
it's
but he was in the public eye, as we said
uh
before, and there were so many conspiracy theories about, did the mafia have him assassinated? Did the
mhm,
FBI have him assassinated? Who was behind it?
mhm.
And that's something that, I say that eventually the truth comes out, but with his assassination, the jury's still out, which means that nobody's decided. There isn't
Nobody's decided
concrete
yet.
proof of what
Yeah,
happened there, which is
yeah.
interesting.
And I agree with you. I think it's okay that people try to find out what the truth is, and I have no problem that people speculate. I don't particularly like the speculation, but I don't listen to it. Yeah, but I think it's legitimate that people can speculate. What I object to is the fact that a murder is filmed and it's repeatedly played.
Shown. Mhm.
I think that that's very damaging, really, to all societies, because it trivializes such a horrific act, and it's not necessary. That footage is not really necessary for the discussion about, did the mafia do it or did somebody else do it.
Yeah, no, I agree, but that's
I
the
don't
sense
think, I think it's awful that the last thing, I mean, I know that he's a public figure, but I think your death is a very personal moment. It's not a public moment. and
yeah.
and I certainly, for the rest of the family who see that, it's also like, yeah, it must be very painful, I think, for anybody who is close to him. Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. But I mean, that's the media, and I
Mhm.
really dislike that thing about the media.
Delaney says, life for celebrities is very complicated. It is. Life and death in this case. Yeah.
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 So this idea of where you were and what you were doing when celebrities or famous people died or were assassinated, this is a question for you watching live at the moment. Are there any
Mhm.
famous people whose death really had a big impact on you in a similar way to Bob Marley had an impact on me?
On you.
And
Uh-huh.
you said Gorbachev had an impact on you when you heard the news.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't make me cry, but it wasn't quite as
Has any has
dramatic as
any
yours.
has any death of any famous figure who you didn't know personally make you cry?
I don't think it has, but I do remember that when Nelson Mandela died, because I love Africa. I love the continent of Africa, and I've been to South Africa. I've been to other countries in Africa, and I really like it. And I know that, and I knew a lot about Nelson Mandela. And when Nelson Mandela died, I do remember feeling very anxious because Nelson Mandela had managed to have this peaceful transition after apartheid, and he'd managed to, I mean, unite, obviously not fully, but he had managed to achieve something that nobody thought would be possible in South Africa. And I remember when he died, I thought, oh, they are very, very big shoes to fill, for any subsequent leader. What will happen when the subsequent leader comes after Nelson Mandela? Will they be able to still keep the peace in South Africa? And they did, more or less, but obviously nobody has really filled his shoes, and South Africa has a lot of problems now.
Yeah,
I mean, it
yeah,
didn't turn into a civil war or anything horrible like that, but it hasn't been easy, I don't think, since he
yeah,
died.
yeah. And
Uh-huh.
he showed the world a fantastic example of somebody
Hmm.
who he won the Nobel Peace Prize, didn't he?
Yeah, I think so. He was very unifying and very
Mm,
a very I don't know, he I think he was an example to people of how to deal with conflict, that you might not agree with one another, but that you have to try to work to be able to live alongside one another. And I respected that a lot. So it did bother me, his death, because I remember feeling quite anxious after
mm.
I heard that he died.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
me too. Me too.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what about 9/11, the attack
Oh,
on the
well,
Twin Towers
yeah, I
in New
mean, I
York?
absolutely remember that, because that was such that was a news breaking story, wasn't it? Where everybody said, you have to turn on the television
So
and see
where
what's
were you and
happening.
what were you doing? Do you remember?
Yes, I
Because
do.
I
I was
don't.
at, really? Oh,
No,
you
I
don't?
don't know.
Oh, so
I was
you see these
probably I
strange,
think I was here at home. I don't remember how I found out about it. I remember turning on the TV and watching the news on the
uh-huh,
TV here in Valencia, but I don't remember much about it. I remember being shocked and
uh-huh,
amazed. Is this real? Is this really happening?
yeah, yeah,
But I don't remember how I actually got to hear about it. If somebody
uh-huh.
phoned me or
Uh-huh.
no.
No, what I remember, because I'd gone to New Zealand with my twins. They were only 18 months old. And we were waiting because my husband came a couple of weeks afterwards. And we had just picked up my husband a few hours before it happened. We picked him up from the airport, and my parents had made a nice bed for him so that he could sleep and rest after the long journey. And and my parents had actually gone to sleep in the neighbor's house because they wanted to let my husband be able to recuperate. And the house was quite small. My parents' house at that time was quite small, and we had the babies, and we knew the babies would be waking. So my parents were sleeping in the neighbor's house. And suddenly, it was very early in the morning, the phone went, and
Mhm.
it woke my husband up, and it woke the babies up, and I jumped out of bed and got the phone, and it was a friend of the family, and they were saying, you've got to turn on the news, you've got to turn on the news. And I said, hang on, because he's asleep, Mariana's asleep. And she's going, no, 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 you've got to turn on the news, and she was all panicky. And I
Yeah.
remember that I went into the room and then turned on the news, and then literally like 5 minutes later my parents were at the door, and it was a huge thing, and we had the television on, and my husband got up, and because it was just so shocking to see. And of course, if you turn the news on right at the beginning, you actually saw the
The
second and the
the
third
second time.
impact,
Yeah.
with the Pentagon, and then the second tower. And it was the most horrific thing I've ever watched, I think, on
Yeah.
television. I
Yeah.
think
It didn't seem like reality. It seemed
no,
like it was maybe some fiction, or you couldn't conceive it that was
Oh,
actually happening.
it was
It's
surreal,
horrible.
wasn't it? Surreal, we would
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
Um,
So I'm amazed that you can't remember what you were doing
well, no,
because,
no, I
uh-huh.
remember. I remember watching it on the news. I just don't. Maybe because I was by myself, and going
Mhm.
back to what you said earlier, I think if I'd have been with people, it would have
Mhm.
had more of an impact on me. And I also think I heard about it after the fact. So I was watching the
Mhm.
reruns of the news. I was watching old news that had happened a few hours before.
Yeah, that's not
So I
that
didn't
I
it's
think,
not so impactful.
yeah, Hema, if you can put up Hema's last comment, she's also said that she remembers she was watching the news with my family when just at that moment the second airplane crashed into the second twin tower,
Twin
and all of
Tower.
us were shocked. We
We
couldn't
couldn't believe
believe
it.
it. There's a couple of
Yeah.
typos, but that's okay. I know it's just from fluency typing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was that. And well done, Hema, because if we can just go back to English for a moment, you've controlled your tenses perfectly. Because when we're telling these stories, I also wanted to point out we're often using past continuous, past simple, the verbs used to, or I was, yeah. And you've used them all very, very well then. Yeah, you've used
Yeah.
I was watching, which is past continuous. That's what you were doing when the other thing interrupted the action, which is the second airplane crashed into the Twin Towers. Uh-huh. And
Yeah.
everything else past simple. Excellent. Well done, Hema.
Perfect. Very
Mhm.
good. Yeah, yeah, very, very sad.
Yeah,
Another
that was.
sad piece of news, but more recent, was the first and the last day of the lockdown. I can
Mhm.
remember the first day because I went out for a walk, and I was
Oh,
really,
did you get
really
arrested?
no,
Because
because
you
it was
weren't allowed to go
before.
out for a walk.
Well, it was before they'd put the restrictions in place. I'd
Ah,
been
you went there.
abroad.
It was the night before or something.
I think it was a couple of days before, because I remember
Mhm.
I flew back from a conference. I was abroad and I came back to Spain when COVID had started, but they hadn't
Mhm.
put the restrictions in place. So
Mhm.
I went out for a walk, and I remember being very, very nervous. I remember crossing the streets and not getting too close to people. And
Mhm.
I felt like I was in a science fiction
Mhm.
film, not knowing how close I could get to people and what was
Mhm.
happening. And that feeling of trepidation, that's a good
Yes.
word,
Uh-huh.
trepidation, not
Trepidation.
knowing
Mhm.
what's going to happen, that sticks in my mind.
Yeah, that for me
Trepidation.
too. It might not have been I mean, I remember it happened very suddenly the first day, and it wasn't too dramatic because we were just at home. It just meant we couldn't go out. But so I can't remember what we actually did that day. I think we watched a lot of television the first week. We had the news on all the
Yeah,
time. You were
Netflix.
waiting. No, that came in the second week. But the first week I was
And
a
the third and the
news
fourth and the fifth. Yeah.
the first week I was just a news junkie. That's another expression, a news
Yes.
junkie. I had the news on permanently until my daughter said, "Can we stop watching the news?" And I said, "You're quite right. It was good that they told me that because it was all
Hmm.
repeated anyway."
Yeah.
But I do remember the very first time I went to a supermarket, we were allowed to leave to go shopping, weren't we? If you were over a certain age, if you were an adult,
Hmm.
you were allowed to shop. And the
Yeah.
first time I went and stood in the queue, and I remember the queue for the shop was around the car park. It
I
was like a
remember that.
spiral
Yes.
around the car park. Everybody was standing at a distance from each other. Everybody had the mask. And it was trepidation. That's a perfect word for it. Everybody was anxious somehow. And you were trying to stay calm, but there was this sense that people were very nervous about, are we all going to drop down dead right now?
So here's a question for you, because you've also mentioned the last day of the lockdown. Now, is do you think COVID is more or less over, or is it on pause because of the tourist season in Europe, especially over here in Spain during the summer? They
Ah,
wanted the money from tourists, so it wasn't really in the news. Is it going
mhm.
to come back harder in the winter, do you think? Are we
I
going to have a COVID revival?
Well, I think it's still there, isn't it? I think people will still get news about COVID. But to be frank with you, when I've been traveling, in New Zealand and in Portugal last week, I think most people just don't want to know about it anymore. Like, people are not wearing masks really, except where they have to. So
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, of course, there are people who have to take care and probably still are wearing masks. But my impression from the general public is that most people have just had enough of it, and they're just
I want to get back
going
to
forward.
normal,
They want to go
even
back
if
to
they
normal,
run the
even
risk
if
of
they run the
catching it.
risk of catching it. I think so too.
Yeah.
Elisa has shared something with us. She says she remembers, I think we're talking about the
COVID.
COVID,
Hmm.
or are you talking about the 9/11? I'm not sure. You'll have to tell us, Elisa. But she says, I remember that day quite well. My dad had had a brain attack, so he was at hospital.
We
I
would
think
probably
we
say
would say
stroke.
stroke,
Have a
Elisa, to have a
stroke.
stroke. That's when you have
Ictus.
a
Ictus.
ictus. I watched the news on TV there, and my dad
Oh,
believed it was
9/11.
fake news. Okay, as his brain was affected. Yes, well, that's quite reasonable, isn't it, Elisa? Because it was so shocking.
Yeah.
Nobody could quite believe that something like that could happen at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember, Elisa, you have to say the news, right? The news. The news means for us the news broadcast, or it means the piece of news, but you have to have the before. You need the article.
Although you never say a news, because even though there's an
No, it's
S,
not
it's an
countable. Mhm.
uncountable noun. So,
That's right.
as Lynn said, a piece of news or some news.
Some
Yeah.
news or the news. And we often use the news when we're talking about the television program. Yeah.
Well, we've been speaking about some very, very depressing things, Lynn. Let's make
Oh,
it a bit lighter. Let's change the mood.
change the mood. No more death.
Do you remember your first kiss?
Of course I do, but I'm not telling anything about that on public broadcasting. You shall just all have to use your imaginations. It was
Well,
nice.
I
Do you
don't
remember
mind.
your first kiss,
Of
Craig?
course I do. I think I was maybe 1 year old, and my mum kissed me, and it was
Oh,
very wet. I didn't
that's
like it.
not the first kiss we refer to when we
We
say, "Do
don't
you
we don't
remember your first kiss?"
we don't kiss and tell. Actually, I do. I think it was in a phone box. I think
In
it
a
was
phone box.
yeah, there was a couple of girls that my friend and I had met in the local shopping center, and
Mhm.
we'd swapped phone numbers, and we were very, very nervous, and we'd arranged to meet them one evening. And I think I started quite late. I was probably maybe 14 or 15. I think that's quite late, isn't it? And and we went, I don't know if we went to the park or we went somewhere, but I think, yeah, my first kiss was in a phone box, which is a bit
Well, what were you
depressing.
doing in a phone box? It was probably so she couldn't get out, or what? The phone boxes, the reason I'm laughing like that is because the old phone boxes in Britain, the red ones, I'm sure
Like
you've seen them.
The Doctor Who
Uh-huh.
TARDIS. Yeah.
The people who don't, but they had very, very heavy doors. I remember the doors were really
Yes,
heavy, and
it's
it was quite hard to get two people in a phone box. You had to
yes,
sort of squeeze in.
but quite intimate and very difficult for the girl to get out and escape. She probably pushed me inside, I would think.
Maybe. But
Yeah.
was it nice though? Did you enjoy
Oh,
it?
yes, it was very
Uh-huh.
nice, and so nice I actually repeated it on several occasions
With
since.
the same girl, or
Um, yeah, we weren't actually boyfriend and girlfriend. I think we did meet once or twice after.
uh-huh.
Um, and yeah,
Mm,
I wasn't very successful with girls when I was younger.
uh-huh. Okay. And maybe you heard Craig mentioned it and I said it. I said I don't kiss and tell. And Craig said he does kiss and tell. And what does that mean, Craig? Would you like to explain that little idiom? Because it's quite
That's
common, isn't it? Kiss and tell.
Yeah. Well, it could be a euphemism for talking about any of your sexual
Hmm.
exploits or anything you
Hmm.
do with a partner. But yes, you kiss someone and then you go and tell your friends. So you're
Uh-huh.
kissing and then you're telling other people, which is not very nice for
Uh-huh.
the intimacy of the situation. Caroline's got
Mm.
very vivid memories of telephone boxes in Germany, which are yellow, whereas in the UK they're red, or they were
Uh-huh.
red. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously we have mobile phones now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the doors are very heavy.
Heavy, and they had heavy doors. Uh-huh.
What about, maybe we should make this the last question. What about your
Mm-hmm.
first job? Do you remember that?
Oh,
But
yes,
we
I
have
do.
to define this though. I mean, are we talking about a part-time job or anything we got money for, maybe
Oh, the
from our
first time I
parents?
had it. No, the first time I had a job paid for by strangers.
Strangers. Okay, so a serious
Like
job.
a proper job with a national insurance number for
So
me.
tell us
Yeah,
about it.
because I had done babysitting and things like that before. No, my first job was, and I actually loved this job. I have to tell you, I worked in a shop called Little Woods. Can you remember Little Woods
Of
from England?
course. Yeah, very
Little Woods
well.
was kind of like a department store, like so it sold clothes, it sold furniture, it sold food. And my first job was a Saturday job. So it was for students to work just on Saturdays. And they put me in the food department. And I loved the food department. My favorite department to be working on was the cheese, because I'm a cheese lover. So I learned in that job how to cut these massive blocks of cheese. And I just loved the job because I was surrounded by cheese all day. The other counter that I really loved working on was the sweet counter.
What's a
So
counter?
a counter is like the sort of little stall or the little area in the shop where the people wait and they ask you to serve them. So nowadays they don't exist like that a lot in supermarkets, but often in supermarkets in Spain, they still have a fresh meat counter or they have a fish counter. Yeah. So the counter is where you have to wait for the person to serve you. You can't just pick up the food and go
And
to the cash
a
desk.
cheese counter.
And the cheese counter. Well, when I worked, there was a counter for everything, and I loved working on the cheese counter. I liked working on the sweet counter, but it was a bit mathematically challenging on the sweet counter because the people used to say, "I want 2 ounces of peanuts, and I want 2 ounces of this," and you had to add everything up in your head. Because there was no calculator, so you had to keep
Yeah.
track of all of this, and then you wrote it down and then gave it to them, or they bought it immediately. The sweet counter I love, and the one that I lived every week, I was dreading. Dreading is when you really don't want to go on it. I dreaded for 2 years that they would put me on the meat counter.
Why?
The meat counter was with the real meat, like with pieces of beef and bloody animals and chopping, but they never did because they had proper butchers. They wanted more experienced people on the meat counter. So I was really happy about that. But I worked on the fruit counter, and my favorite thing was getting on the cash out, to play with the till.
Yeah.
and the conveyor belt and the till. But in those days, I had to remember the prices of all the products because you had to key in every price for everything. And so if the customers wanted you to be quick, you had to remember an awful lot of prices of things.
I can understand you liking it because you're
I
very
loved it.
good with people and chatting
Mm-hmm.
and being not serving people in the meaning of making them happy and giving them
Yeah, I
good
just loved it.
service,
I
chatting to them.
loved it. I always thought I would quite like to do that again. But now in a supermarket, it's a little bit boring because with the scanner tills,
Yeah.
and people nowadays they because it's all self-service, people don't interact very much with the shop assistants. I find often there isn't even eye contact, and
But
that must be quite
it's a dying
depressing.
profession. It's a
Yeah.
dying profession, isn't it? Because
Hmm.
now with automatic machines that you swipe yourself,
Yeah.
It's a dying profession. Gemma says, in my case, the first and only one was many years ago before my son was born. So what did you
Oh,
do,
what did
Gemma?
you
What was
do,
your
Hema?
job?
What was your job?
Tell
Tell us
us.
what your job was.
My first job, my first paid job that wasn't cash in hand, because I did some casual work for friends of my dad, but the first legal paid job was in McDonald's. I worked in
Oh,
McDonald's
really?
during my summer holiday. Yeah.
But
Cooking
that must have been in
hamburgers.
London, was it?
No, it was my local McDonald's in a suburb of London
I
where
was
I
going to say,
lived.
because we're about the same age, but I remember my first visit to McDonald's, I was quite old, because in the Northeast, McDonald's went to the Northeast later, you know?
Mhm.
So how old were you when you had your first job?
That's a good question. 17?
17. My first job
Yeah.
was, I was 15 and 8 months, because that was when you could
Wow.
legally work.
That's
On
young
the
to be
Saturday
working.
job, yeah. I loved it.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I'd
Oh,
had
Himmer was a data recorder. Oh, so
interesting.
like you
Okay.
keyed in data,
Yeah.
into computers. Wow. Ah, okay.
Yep.
Grabadora de datos.
That was interesting.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
Right.
we've changed the mood. I think we've lightened the mood a bit, and we can go off happy to watch the news and get depressed again. So before we say goodbye, we'll just tell you where we're from and what we do, in case this is your first time watching. And I'm here every week, every Wednesday, and Lynn joins me every second Wednesday. So we'll be back together again 2 weeks from now. But Lynn, why don't you tell people what they can expect to find on putitlikethis.com and how you can help them with their English?
All right. So putitlikethis.com is my website. So if you want to find out what I do, or you want to contact me, you can do it over the website. I'm an online teacher. I tailor make courses to suit your objectives. So some of my students are teachers and they want to improve their fluency in English. Some of my students are students of English who want maybe to do an exam. Some of my students are business people who have to make a presentation or sell a product. And some of my students, for example, are also academics who publish articles in English, and they need help with their academic writing. So they're just a few of the things that I do. But if you go to my website, you can check it out. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can contact me over the website.
And my name's Craig. I'm from the website mentioningles.com, where you can study English for free, and also the podcast inglespodcast.com, where you can listen and improve your English also for free. But if you really want to pay me, what you can do is go to inglespodcast.com, sign up for the newsletter on the website, because on the 6th of October, which is, what's that, Lynn? 2 weeks from now?
2 weeks' time, yep.
I'm going to launch another conversation course to improve your fluency, your pronunciation, your general English speaking. So if that's something you're interested in, sign up there and I will be in touch by email to give you more details. So one course that I've really, really enjoyed. I had a lovely 2 groups of lovely students that's finishing this week. And then there'll be a new course starting from the 6th of October, which is a Thursday. And it will be every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 weeks. So if that sounds good, if that sounds interesting, join the email list and I will be in touch with more details. So thank you for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much, Lynn.
Yes, thank you. And I'll see you again in a couple of weeks' time. And thank you, everybody, for sharing as well your moments. Yeah.
Yeah. Take care. Have a good week. Have a good weekend. And we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
All right, then. Bye-bye.